Translation Services by Ms. Naira Alvira, our Multicultural Department. So if you would, please rise with me for the invocation. Pastor Reedy here.
She's probably not here. She
She's
thinks
not
it's
here.
5:30, yes.
Okay,
She thinks our meeting's 5:30. Sorry.
Mr. Bass.
Mr. Bass, you'd like to?
Listen, Mr. Arguello does a fantastic
Okay.
job. And if he would just so do that, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, Robert.
Well,
Lord, thank you for bringing us all together. On behalf of the children and the citizens of this county, allow us to use our best judgment to commit to making decisions for the betterment of our community and to allow these decisions to lead to the best results for the people we serve. In your name, Jesus Christ, amen.
Turn and face the flag, please. In saying the pledge, please remember all those that have served and are serving to protect this great country and our freedoms. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And you may be seated. Well,
I can sing national
no,
anthem.
school's
Is that
out.
right?
School's out.
The mission statement for the school district of Osceola County is inspiring all learners to their highest potential to be responsible and productive citizens.
Good afternoon, I'm Naira Alvira, and I am here to provide interpretation services.
Buenas tardes, estoy aquí para proveer servicio de interpretación.
Bring us to our board comment section. Mr. Melendez?
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to thank all the staff that put together all the graduations because they're literally back to back to back. And, when we have the individual graduations, we honor the staff that's there at the school. And sometimes we forget that it takes a lot of logistics in the background. And so I saw a lot of folks back there editing tape and putting things together. And so Dr. Evans, it was good to have our little Facebook moments and everything. And so same thing with you, Mr. Flowers. It was nice to actually meet you on a personal level beyond just behind the dais. And so it was good to do that. And so and I think that our children did phenomenal. They behaved well. There was no incidents. But there was one incident that I would be remiss to say. We had a student walk across the stage from Toho High School that got out of her wheelchair for the very first time ever. And she said, you know what, I'm gonna walk across the stage on my own 2 feet. And I thought that was amazing that these students care that much about their education. And I'm gonna care as much too to be there as well. Thank you.
Ms. Castillo?
Thank you. Great words, Mr. Melendez. So of course, I would be remiss not to mention graduation. It was great. I think we're still doing graduations, hence why we have a 2 p.m. meeting today. But yeah, I mean, it really puts it into perspective why we do what we do. We can get lost in contracts and politics up here in the dais, but going to a graduation, that's why we're here. And for me, at least, it was really my reminder that students first, and that's why we do what we do. So I was really appreciative of being able to attend OHS and Celebration High School's graduations, great speeches. Team, we have an amazing group of children that we have educated who are going to become the next leaders of our county and our country. And seeing them listening to their speeches, listening to their GPAs, it really makes me proud to do the work that we do. We all do this work together, and we do have a lot of, we may not always agree on how we're going to get to the place, but knowing that at the end of the day, it's about our students and it's about making them great leaders, I think that we can all share at least that on the dais. I also want to thank OHS's Osceola Club as well as their, I forgot the name of the other club, but I did. Coming to America, thank you so much. I attended their end of year party, and it was such a fun event. It was a great celebration, and it was put together by some great sponsors, Gina Nalvarez and Ms. Escobar, as well as Mr. Manny Hernandez. These kids are incredible, and they're so happy to be able to receive an education here. So I had a great time attending that. And of course, one more congratulations to Mr. Rode from Celebration High School. He got the Teacher of the Year award, and I was able to personally deliver the award with him along with Dr. Pace, Ms. Haas, Mr. Burns, and Mr. Gilbert. So congratulations, Mr. Rode, on that achievement. Thank you.
Mr. Arguello?
Yeah, first of all, a huge congratulations to all the kids. I think I shook about 2,000 hands over this past couple of weeks, which was kind of just cool to make contact with these kids and look them in the eye and say, hey, congratulations, good job. It was an amazing experience. I wanted to thank Mr. Melendez, who attended every single graduation. That was awesome. I went to, I don't even know how many, but it was a lot and it was exhausting, and you went to all 3 a day for a lot of time, so congratulations to that. In the same turn, not only Dr. Pace did the same thing, went to all the graduations everywhere, so thank you, Dr. Pace, for just representing us well always. And to Tanya Culver, who not only attended every graduation on Memorial Day for, I guess, 10 years, Tanya, or something like that, but and just doing so much hard work behind the scenes on a constant basis always, and being a tremendous amount of support to us. This job would be a million times more difficult if you're not around. I just want you to know how much I appreciate you, so thank you very much.
Dr. Pace? Oh, I'm sorry. Robert?
I guess I don't count anymore.
No, you do. He was leaving you for last.
I was
Yes,
saving you for last.
Again, I thank all of you for attending, and as everybody knows, I always start off by thanking the teachers and the staff for the incredible work that they do. And as our other board member said, I did attend several of the graduations, and those who couldn't attend, because I'm a father of a graduating senior, I watched the valedictorian, salutatorian, and the principal speeches online, and I needed that. This is my first graduation ceremonies, and I was able to look at it both from a school board member and as a father of a graduating senior. And I was very impressed with the ceremonies. I was very impressed with the decorum. I was incredibly impressed with the behavior of all the students. And when they walked across the stage and I shook their hands or congratulated them or fist bump, it was thank you, sir, thank you, sir, thank you, sir. That doesn't just fall from the sky. That is taught. That is taught by the teachers. That's taught by the parents. And I want to congratulate them on that. To listen to the principals and their speeches and look at the level of respect that our students have for their principals and the level of respect that the principals are sharing. St. Cloud's ceremony just kind of blew me away. Principal Fancher just did a phenomenal job. And 5 years ago, we had 11 students countywide that graduated with their AA degree. St. Cloud had 5% of their graduating class finished with an AA degree. We have 132 students finishing with their AA. That accolade alone lays right at the doorstep of our teachers to getting our students prepared for that secondary education. $51 million in scholarships that our students have earned. Duke, I think Celebration, Duke University has, I looked it up just in the parking lot, 7% acceptance rate. They have 4 students from Celebration are going to go to Duke. It just completely blew me away standing, and I went up to Principal Fancher at the end of his speech, at the end of the ceremony, because I wanted to thank him personally for everything that he had done to raise the bar to where it needed to be. It's just he and I, and he had the opportunity to thank me and take a little bit of that role as the principal and say thank you, which he did. But the way he responded, he said, "Don't thank me, it's the team." He took no responsibility for that. He said, "It's the team," and I want to just congratulate for what he has done. I'm going to close this up with, as a parent, my daughter finished with a 4.27 GPA. And I'm not saying that to boast because it's not genetic. Trust me, it's not on my board. But she finished 75th in her class at 4.27, and she still finished 75th. It's just amazes me how our whole district has elevated themselves, and it helped me become more focused on why we're here. We're here for these students, and we're here for the teachers. And I'm not going to get bogged down with politics. I'm not going to get bogged down with the negativity. I'm going to stay laser focused on that because that's exactly why we're here. And circling back one more time to my daughter, saying about her success. Her success didn't, obviously we contributed to it, but I attribute her success to that third grade teacher, Mrs. Guin, who turned the light on in her world and taught her how to navigate through math. And in fifth grade, Mrs. Waller, who in that beautiful Jamaican accent told me one day, she says, my babies and I are going on a journey. Some of them are going to walk along beside, some are going to be kicking and screaming, but we're all going to get there together. And there's a lot of teachers that have that same philosophy, and I want to thank each and every one of you who take that role and take it serious. And I will do the best that I can as a board member to support you. I know it ran a little bit long, but it was really emotional.
Well said.
It was really emotional, and I want to thank all of you.
Very well said. Dr. Pace, again.
Your turn.
I don't know that I can add anything to the comments that you guys have all made. It was, certainly a long couple of days, but a very, very, very important time when I think about where we were a year ago and how far we've come and how much joy there was across the arena as we got to celebrate the amazing accomplishments of our students. And as all of you have pointed out, it really goes back to the team of teachers, administrators, staff members, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, everybody that it takes to serve these students each and every day. And I also want to say thank you again to our entire community relations team, to Tanya, to Vicky and Chandra for the amazing work that they did to help make our graduations happen for the kids in our community. And it's just been a very exciting time. But we finished the school year, COVID or no COVID, our kids have kept learning, and that's what really, really matters at this stage of the game.
Anything else, board?
Oh, congratulations to Dr. Allen, right?
Yes, sir. Very good.
I forgot about that earlier. I'm sorry,
Thank you,
Doctor.
Julius. We'll go back to that. Dr. Pace, appointments and transfers.
Yes, Chairman Thacker, members of the board, I'm excited to bring forward a couple of more recommendations to round out our administrative teams for the year. If I could ask Dr. Listinia Penaloza to come to the podium. Board members, I am pleased tonight to recommend Dr. Penaloza as the Executive Director of Multicultural Curriculum Instruction and Compliance. She has been a fiscal officer at Pomano Community Center, a middle school teacher at Imagine Schools, an ESOL programs specialist at Imagine Schools, school administrator at Imagine Schools, school administrator for the Osceola County School District, and currently has been serving as the coordinator for multicultural curriculum, helping to support our ELL students and teachers and staff. She received her bachelor's degree in accounting from Queens College, a master's degree in educational leadership from Nova Southeastern, and her doctorate in performance improvement leadership from Capella University. And I'm confident Dr. Penaloza is going to pick right up where Dr. Reyes has been guiding us.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Arguello, a second by Ms. Castillo. Board, any further questions, comments? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations and best of luck.
Good afternoon, Chairman Thacker, board members, Dr. Pace, and leadership staff. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve in this capacity. Being an emerging bilingual myself, I am a product of public education, and I understand the importance of our work. In me, you will find someone who will champion for all students while continuing to strengthen the support for our emerging bilinguals and our families. Thank you to my mentors and colleagues along the way who believed in me, guided me, and pushed me outside of my comfort zone. Thank you, Dr. Reyes, for your leadership and support. And of course, thank you to my amazing multicultural education dream team, some members who are here supporting me and others are watching here. I want to also share this moment with my husband, James, who's my biggest cheerleader, my children, Monica, Jonathan, and James, who are all here, and my families and friends near and far. I am so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Next, Chairman Thacker, if I can invite to the podium Dr. Jeanette Long. Dr. Long is an Osceola success story, graduating from Gateway High School and going on to serve our district and our community. She has been an ESOL resource and compliance specialist at Anna G. Mendez University. She's been an adjunct professor at Ana G. Mendez University, a middle school teacher of dance at Osceola County School for the Arts, and assistant principal at Osceola County School for the Arts since 2015. She received her bachelor's degree in elementary education from the University of Central Florida, a master's degree in integration of technology in the classroom from Walden University, a master's degree in educational leadership from American College of Education, and her doctorate degree in post-secondary and adult education from Capella University. And I am confident Dr. Long will just do a great job with Dr. Penaloza and the rest of our team.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Castillo with a second by Mr. Arguello to approve Dr. Long. Bless you. Board, any further comments?
Go Panthers.
Other than go Panthers, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign, motion carries 5-0. Dr. Long, congratulations. And
Thank you, everybody. It is a pleasure. I'm elated. The opportunity that is afforded to me is not taken lightly. As Dr. Pace said, I am a proud graduate of Gateway High School. Go Panthers. I've been in the district for 25 years, and nothing gives me more satisfaction as a ESOL student myself, as a parent of dual language, 4 children in the dual language program. I am so excited to be able to join Dr. Penaloza as our director and moving forward in the vision of the county. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. My mom is here, my eternal cheerleader, my bestie forever, our dean at OCSA, Ms. Tiffany Bell, and my fabulous and wonderful principal that came to support me. More than a principal, a brother in this past year that we have known each other. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
congratulations.
And now, board members, I'm recommending the administrative transfer of Miss Elizabeth Terry, currently the assistant principal at Boggy Creek Elementary School, to be the assistant principal at Kissimmee Elementary School for the upcoming school year.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Castillo with a second by Mr. Bass to approve Elizabeth Terry's transfer. Board, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those like sign, motion carries 5-0. Dr. Pace, is that it?
That's it, sir.
Thank you very much. At this time, if any of those of you are here just for that, you may feel welcome to make your way out. We would love to have you stay and listen to the next 2-3 hours of this, but we understand. And we will go ahead and recess the regular scheduled board meeting, and we will call to order our budget workshop for Tuesday, June 1st. And Ms. Grover, I believe I will turn it over to you, is that correct?
Good afternoon. Is it easier for you guys if I take this off?
Just take that off, we can hear you better. It's
I can barely read your lips better.
Okay. All right. This is the school board budget workshop. We're going to specifically address the general fund, our operating budget, and capital budget today, as well as we'll talk some about the ESSER grant dollars and hopefully get some input from the board on how we want to move forward with that. So, a little bit different standing up here trying to do a workshop interactive session, but this is for you guys, so please feel free to chime in, any questions, any input. Let's try and make it interactive as you guys wish. So I'm just gonna start flipping through the book. First we have the introductory section. On page I-2 is the budget timeline. We're here today on June 1st, having the budget workshop for general and capital funds, as I mentioned. And then the next times, the highlighted lines are the next time we'll come before the board. So on July 13th, we'll be presenting the tentative budget. You guys will not take any action at that time, but that's when we'll present all funds. And then on July 27th will be the first required public hearing to adopt the tentative budget and millage rates. And then on September 7th will be the final public hearing to adopt the final budget and millage rates. And then, of course, staff will take care of all the required filings.
I have a question. I know it seems kind of done, but school starts in August, right? Why does the budget get approved for the year after the school starts?
It's in accordance with the Truth and Millage Act, so the timeline is all laid out for the legislative statute.
So when
We're
school
required to
starts,
follow.
does it still kind of go by the ending of last year's budget to kind of fill out? Or, I mean, if we want something, you know, I'm trying to say with the timing, I never thought about that, you know what I mean? So it's like, how does the beginning of the school year get funded?
So we are funded, so the way that the FEFP dollars actually flow, will all kick in July 1, our budget will kick in July 1, but it is not officially finalized until it's approved in the first week of September.
All right, so last question, just for that purpose. So if we decide to increase people's salary 3%, I'm just making it up, then by the time it gets approved in October, then is it like retroactively pay people? Because, you know, August already kind of started, you know what I mean?
Now we approve it.
Yeah, so salary negotiations are effective based on whatever effective date once the board approves it, and typically we do make those retroactive to July 1 or the beginning of the contract start date. But that timeline is specific to salary negotiations approved by the board, separate from the annual budget. Because it has to be ratified by the unions as well.
Okay, thank you.
The next couple of pages in your book are the budget conventions, and these are just kind of explain how the budget's put together and some of the key items. I'm not going to go through those in detail. Go to page I-6, you have the FTE historical and projected overview chart for the last 10 years, and you can see the growth in our student population. If you look over on the right-hand side, you will see that little bit of a dip in the 2020-21 school year. As we know, that is the current year effect of COVID and some of the students that did not show up in our district. We are expecting to see that growth again next year on our normal trajectory. So, projection for next year is 71,901 FTE, which is much closer to where we thought we would have been at the beginning of this school year.
And we talked about that when we met separately. We still have kind of like the unknown of the first year students that were purposely held back during COVID. I mean, are we going to get an uptick in those kindergartners that are?
So yes, so there is a thought that some of that is potentially kindergartners that did not enter the system in the current year. I'm not sure exactly how much of that we think happened here in Osceola County, but that is definitely a dynamic at play nationwide. The next two pages are the FTE projections in comparison to the current year broken down by school level. And we've talked through some of these. The big swings have to do with redistricting, as well as schools where we've added an extra grade level, such as Neo City and Canoe Creek K-8, where we're adding 7th and 8th grade for the coming year. On the next page, you have the charter schools, as well as our McKay and Family Empowerment Scholarship Program. We are expecting the Family Empowerment Scholarship numbers to grow significantly next year. We haven't necessarily increased the projection here, but we do have the over 700 FTE still sitting in undistributed. I would expect that a lot of that undistributed number will most likely end up in the voucher program. And the McKay and Gardner scholarships are now being rolled into Family Empowerment. So that'll all be one program going forward. The next page is our historical growth chart on the tax millage and levy. And you can see the millage rates at the top and then the total tax roll and levy down at the bottom. And obviously we've been increasing significantly over the years. The RLE is projected to be 3.753 for next year, and that is just a slight decrease over the current year. The total tax roll that was included in the FEFP conference report was the $35.8 billion. We have received the projected tax roll at this point, and we'll get the certified roll on July 1st, but do expect it to be up slightly. So that'll get recalculated in the second FEFP calculation and then incorporated into the next version of the budget. The next page is the FEFP funding comparison from this year to next year's projected conference report. And a couple of things I want to highlight on this page. The base student allocation is going up by $53.42. And those are the unrestricted dollars that are can go to salary increases and anything that has to be funded out of a non-restricted funding source, such as the Florida Retirement System rate increase. So for our district, we're projecting that the FRS rate increase will equate to about $2.4 million that we'll have to fund out of our unrestricted dollars.
Ms. Craven, I think Ms. Castillo has a question. I think, Board, if it's okay with Sarah, as we're going through those, it might be easier to ask the questions when we're there as opposed to going back at the end. So is that okay with you,
Yeah,
Sarah?
absolutely.
Well, it's kind of on the mind.
Yeah. Sorry, Sarah, I don't remember asking this question when we met individually, so 1.9, can you, or maybe I did ask, because I remember asking questions about the required local effort. Why did it decrease in percentage this year?
So, yes, what we had talked about, if you look the last several years, you'll remember that the legislature had the RLE rollback policy in place.
Okay.
So for the increase in the tax roll, the district was not able to receive the full benefit of that increase in property tax value. That has not been implemented for this year. So that's why you'll see it's down just slightly, but not as much as it has been.
Okay,
So we will get the benefit of some of that growth in the tax roll.
okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
was the question just so I'm clear, you mean a decrease in the RLE percentage, like the millage rate itself, not
millage
the
rate.
amount of money collected?
Right.
Okay.
The rate, yes.
Yeah, the rate.
So the rate's going down slightly, the tax roll's going up.
Because
the
property values
total
have increased,
levy
yeah,
will
property
go up.
values increase in order to generate the same dollars as before, the millage rate has to go down for the state when they certify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so back on page I-10, the funding comparison. The other couple of items that I wanted to bring to your attention, the funding compression allocation, which we talk a lot about. You'll see that that's going up, it's on line 32. This year we received $3.7 million, and next year we're projected to receive $5.3 million. So an increase of $1.6 million, which equates to about $22 per student. Osceola, as you all know, but this has been one of our top lobbying priorities for the last few years to make sure that we maintain that funding compression allocation within the FEFP, and we are receiving the biggest benefit from that. That has to do with the fact that our per student funding is on the low end statewide. And then the line 46 is the money that's specific to the class size reduction categorical. And you'll see that that's going down by $4.9 million or 6.44%. That equates to about $77 per student. So statewide, they changed the amount that we receive in class size dollars on the elementary calculation for this year. So everybody is going to be receiving less in their class size categorical. So that's about $77 per student for us. As I mentioned, our funding compression is $22 per student, and then the base student allocation of $53. Those three items in and of themselves just about offset for our district. But then we also have to cover the funding for the FRS rate increase. So high level, that's how some of this is playing out.
What are our total compression dollars?
$5,341,846, and that'll get recalculated in the next version of the FEFP as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Um,
Just couldn't remember.
And it's based on how far below the average we are, so depending on what happens throughout the state with other districts as well can change that dollar amount. Just down at the bottom, I'll highlight that without the emergency order funding adjustment, this is an increase of 0.44% per unweighted FTE. And do want to point out we received over $12 million this year as a result of the emergency order hold harmless adjustment. And we made sure to spend that on non-recurring dollars. So that's what allowed us to fund the additional simultaneous supplements as well as our non-recurring supplements for our employees this year. The next page, again, is just historical chart showing the growth in both our FEFP funding total as well as our revenue per student. Again, you can see our district continues to grow, but you can see that kind of blip in the funding per student because of the hold harmless dollars that we received in the current year that will now fall off next year. So that's why you see it kind of going up and back down. But really, if you take that hold harmless $12 million out, it's still kind of on a normal trajectory of growth. The next page is our per student funding ranking. As you know, we've been down 67 out of 67 for the last couple of years now, so you'll see we've jumped up to 61. A couple of things that play into that. One is the hold harmless funding for this year that really skewed the numbers because depending on how far below FTE projections each district was, that's how much benefit they got from the hold harmless. So we weren't quite as bad off as some other districts, which allowed us to not be dead last because we got proportionately less benefit from the hold harmless. It really increased the state average per student funding that much more. So we were that much further below, which got us more funding compression dollars, which then bumped us up a little bit higher. The other thing I found very interesting, you'll notice that Seminole and Volusia both dropped down below us, and both of those districts did have a substantial increase in their virtual student enrollment. So virtual students are funded at a lower level, so that's playing into these numbers as well. And it'll be interesting to see in August for all 67 districts, once we no longer have the digital or innovative option available, what percentage of kids in each one of the 67 districts really end up back in face-to-face versus their individual districts' virtual programs. Because they are funded lower, that's playing into the total funding as well.
Sarah, Mr. Arguello is
Actually,
good. Never mind.
Okay?
Forget anything I said.
Okay. Ms. Castillo, did you have a question?
I'm trying to think if this is even related, but Dr. Pace, when's the deadline for students to decide whether they're gonna go to OVS or not? Do we have a deadline or no?
We don't have a deadline,
So,
but
okay.
we've not seen a tremendous uptick in
Okay,
people going to virtual school.
thank you.
The next couple of pages are the FEFP component narratives, and this just explains each one of the categoricals and the components within them. So go ahead and flip through those couple of pages. And then we come to the general fund section. Page 1-2 is the one-page high-level summary of your general fund budget. At the top you have our beginning fund balance, and this is where we're projecting to end the current year at June 30th. And then obviously the bulk of our revenues come through the FEFP program and our local property taxes. The appropriations section, do want to just point out that the majority of our budget does obviously go to salaries and benefits. And you'll see in the first two lines there, that's about 63%, as well as the charter schools, 21%. So those two lines alone make up 84% of the total operating budget, as well as the Family Empowerment Scholarship and the McKay Scholarship funds are all just pass-through dollars to our district. So we're really only left with about 5 to 6% of our operating budget that we truly have discretion over how we're spending those dollars, aside from salaries and benefits. The next page, page 1-3, is our general fund long-range forecast. I'll bring your attention here to line 5, the operating surplus or deficit line. And you can see that our strategy for the last year or two has been to kind of build up our fund balance. We didn't know this year, obviously we knew about COVID going into this year's budget, but we didn't know if we were gonna be held harmless with our funding due to the students not showing up. And so you'll probably remember, those of you who were here at the end of last year, we intentionally went ahead and built up our general fund balance going into this year to make sure that we would have that cushion due to any state revenue funding shortfalls, which we were expecting at the time due to COVID. So we are going to continue that strategy for now as we move into the 3-year time period of the federal ESSER dollars, with the understanding that we'll start shifting some of what we can out of the general fund into the ESSER grant. And then at the expiration of the ESSER grant, we want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a funding cliff situation where all of a sudden we've been funding a tremendous amount of positions and programming out of non-recurring federal dollars. So the strategy that you'll see laid out here is kind of build up fund balance and then use it back down to our regular level that we've kind of sustained as we move in and out of this ESSER time period.
Mr. Melendez?
And I know we spoke about it during our meeting, and since I have the whole board here, I just wanted to get their opinion. On line 11, or comparing line 10 with 11, 10 is always going to be our 6% policy reserve, and I understand that. But me being a little bit more careful, line 11 becomes line 10 when it's being used up. And I know these are early projections, and she told me about that as well, but you see 2024, it goes down to like single digits. So it's always been in the double digits before, because basically when line 11 gets exhausted, it goes into our line 10. And to me, line 10 is like where we should draw the line. You know, we should not go below 6% of our reserves. So I just want to say, hey, I was cautionary that 23, 24, we're at 13 million, then we knocked down to 6 million. Now we're in the single number digits. Now we're like, okay, something has to happen. And since it's way out in the future, I just want to make sure that we kind of, at least my rule of thumb, I never want to see line 11 go below 10 million. You know, it's like that double digit. Once we hit 10, it's like, okay, warning, warning, warning. You know, I don't want to wait till we get to 6%. And so that's on the schedule. And Sarah mentioned, we're not exactly going to go there because we can always make some changes. I just want to make sure as a board, again, that's my opinion. I just believe number 11 should never go below 10. You
Well,
know,
that would
but
be
that's my opinion only.
That would be a great discussion for us to have during our strategic planning. Because I know fiscal responsibility is one of the items that we have things assigned to. So that might be something that we can bring up or discuss during that time.
I'm with you, Mr. Melendez.
Because then it becomes something that even if it outlives this current board, if it's part of our strategic plan.
And if it does go below 10, maybe it's for like a specific reason. Like, hey, there's a reason why we went down, then let's try to replace it in future years. Because I don't want people to think that, oh, well, we're taking excess money and replacing it. We're replacing it because we have a school board policy that says we don't like 9/11 to go below 10 million.
But we kind of watch just absolute numbers though, because if our total budget climbs, our reserve percentage goes down if it stays absolute. So I hear what you're saying on the $10 million, but I think in total it's got to be a bit of percentage.
A percentage versus a single
Because it's
digit.
going, as we go from $1.2 billion to $1.3 billion, this has got to go up also.
Right.
Makes sense.
Thank you for bringing that up. The next 2 pages are the detail of all of our line items, and you can see here what we've budgeted, what the current year was, and what we recommended for next year. So some changes on there, and I think you guys have all kind of had a chance to look through that individually. If you have specific questions about a line item, just get with me. Page 1-6 is the detail of our SAI budget. Get $15.8 million through the FEFP for SAI or supplemental academic instruction. And you can see we have some money held back here, as well as about a little over 8 million going towards salaries, with the remainder going to the non-salary program allocations. And some of the programs that we typically do fund through the SAI allocation, we're gonna be able to fund through the ESSER grant for the next few years. So that'll free up some of these dollars to stay in reserves. The next page is the same breakdown for the reading allocation. And you see the majority of our reading allocation dollars are going to fund our reading coach salaries, as well as a couple of other reading programs that are identified here. Unless there's any questions on the general fund operating budget, I'll move into capital. So the first couple pages of the capital section are the 5-year capital outlay plan. In our capacity section on page 2-3, the schools that are currently in our 5-year plan, we do have the Celebration Island Elementary School, which is already funded and in the works. And then we have 3 K-8s, one at Kindred, one in the Knightsbridge area, and then Sunbridge area are all proposed for funding within the next 5 years. And those will be entirely funded out of impact fees for capacity projects to add more student stations. And then the next page is all of our non-capacity capital dollars. So this is our 1.5 mil capital outlay tax, as well as our sales tax program, both our half penny and the quarter penny that we share with the county currently. And this is going to fund some of our general fund transfers for the maintenance department, portables, safety and security, school buses, computers, technology, as well as our ongoing cyclical capital projects and our comprehensive renovations. So we've done our first 3 comprehensive renovations through our half penny sales tax program, and now we will be moving into number 4, the Gateway High School project, and then on to OXA, et cetera. So all of that's included in the non-capacity capital budget.
I think you said the things that we have bonded on that, the one tax is gonna be sunsetting potentially, if it doesn't,
The penny sales tax.
the penny, the quarter, I guess it would be the quarter.
Yeah, our quarter.
Our quarter, we have some of that bonded,
Yes,
which will coincide with the sunset, I mean, it'll
correct. Those bonds will be paid off at the
paid off
time
at
that
the time of
that-
the
You don't have to worry, they won't let you bond.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so, I just.
Yeah, that was done intentionally.
Be a nice try.
Now, the one concern I had was, and I kind of mentioned it to you a little earlier, is the Gateway, I know we spoke about the Gateway Comprehensive Project and we're looking at the phases and I was impressed. I never saw the sticker price. And so now I'm hearing $74 million for
The total
remodel.
project budget is $78 million.
Woo! I'm like, Lord, board, for $78 million, we could build a brand new school.
Thought about
You know what I mean? You could just get another site, build a brand new school and sell that land, you know what I mean, or do something with it.
That was
$70 million.
Toho was more than that
84,
about 4 years ago, so.
Toho was it, somebody said 90, huh?
92 million.
92
$92
million
million to
was
build a
Toho.
high school?
Yes,
Yes.
that was 4 years ago, wasn't
Yes,
it?
sir.
So,
When we
with
had,
materials that have gone up, you're not,
Yeah,
you're
it was
not gonna be any
crazy.
cheaper.
we had the conversation, there were some board members in the previous administration that did think about building a brand new school. That was a consideration, but I think ultimately based on the information that we received, that is why we decided to go with just doing the renovation. So it was not gonna be cheaper.
I don't know,
It's a lot more than renovation.
that's just,
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
comprehensive,
it's a
of course.
well, that just sounds astounding. I mean, I don't know if I believe, I don't wanna see numbers built from other places and get an idea of quotes, man, cause $74 million is,
I think
I mean, I know
during
you
the
guys had that
workshop,
conversation before.
we had, I think during the workshop, I think that you may have actually had those numbers side by side. So if we can go back to that workshop where we had that discussion, you would be able to see those numbers side by side.
Yeah, and I can have that as a one-on-one, I don't have to have that here now.
No, no, sure,
But I'm
I'm
just
just,
like,
That's worth lots of Alamo.
absolutely.
74, I'm just having a heart attack. I'm like, I could start a GC company tomorrow maybe and find someone to do it for free. I mean, 74 million for renovation.
comprehensive.
I understand.
Rebuilding almost, and you have to pay them down.
I mean, I can't believe that. I'm just floored, because land for a high school can probably cost about 5 or 6 million, we could probably get, acreage for that, and tell me we can't build a $50 million school?
You need about 75 acres. You've got to have pretty good access, so it's going to be expensive per acre.
I guess I have to look at that later. I
Yeah,
just
no, that's
wanted
a
to let you
really,
know. I'm
that's a
gonna-
really good workshop,
You
because
started,
it's,
that's-
those are the same questions that we all had, and they had,
We all had sticker shock.
Man.
That's what I suggested, Mr. Lynn, like, that a lot of this conversation was had, so I think it would be beneficial for you to go back and maybe meet with Mr. Clinton.
Yeah, I'll do that
and be brought up to speed on how we got to this
And
point with that particular project.
I had sticker shock too, and was taught, because I've spent some time in facilities, and SREF alone, something as simple as having a door swing out into a hallway, that makes your hallways have to be wider. And you don't think about things like that. It's crazy how all those little nuances keep just adding and adding and adding on.
Dr. Pace, your light was on, you
I
changed
was
your mind?
just gonna offer to Mr. Melendez that Mr. Clinch will certainly schedule time to sit down with you and go over the plan, and then we can, always have further discussion.
We're all for it if you find the
Yeah.
golden ticket.
I mean, I don't know, is it our requisites, our specs? Are we requesting too much of a high school? Are we building with
So now
fancy
what do you
town?
see?
Those are the types of questions I'm asking, I'm just like thinking, Lord, I'm not pretending like this is my own money, like would I spend $72 million on a renovation? I'm like, Lord.
I wouldn't.
I'm just like,
Keep in mind too, that we still comply with, maximum cost per student station. We've been lower than the state maximum with every one of our projects that we've finished.
okay, I'll leave that alone, and I'll talk to him.
All right.
See, that's real sticker shock.
So the next couple pages in the capital section just go through the detail of your non-capacity budgets. So safety and security, technology, cyclical capital, and deferred maintenance. So you can see both the carryover is all the projects that are currently budgeted in the current year, and they'll remain on this list until they're fully expended. And then we have a breakdown of the proposed new money budget for the following year, so you can see where we're planning on allocating those dollars. Again, certainly welcome to feedback or anything that the board would like to see differently as we continue to move through the strategic planning process throughout the summer as well. The last couple of pages in this packet, if you flip all the way to 2-16, we've included the debt capacity analysis, and this is specifically for our 1.5 mil capital outlay dollars. So this does not include any bonding that we've done on the sales tax as part of our sales tax program. This is just continuing to pay off our old COPS debt from prior debt issues, with no plans to issue any additional bonding against our ad valorem dollars in the near future. And then the last two pages show you the detail of all of our current debt issues and the outstanding payments on those. So we have just a little over $300 million still outstanding in debt related to our capital program. So that is everything on capital. And then we've also provided some additional handouts related specifically to the ESSER grants. You should have in front of you, this particular document shows the breakdown of some of the categories that have been specified. So we do have specific dollars that have to be spent on the non-enrollment assistance, academic assistance, and technology. And then the advanced lump sum column is $27,966,000 for Osceola School District. Those are dollars that have been advanced and made available to us now in the current fiscal year. So we can start allocating some of our expenditures to this. And those dollars currently have budget appropriation through September 1st. So to the extent that we can start to get those expended, that is certainly our plan to do that, as well as to try and close out the CARES 1 grant as quickly as we can. So the non-enrollment assistance.
Sarah, is this based on pure enrollment?
No, the federal grant is based on Title I numbers.
And Orange County has 4 times Title
I can't take this.
I. We do.
They're about 4 times the size of us, so that makes sense.
They're about 3.5, but that's fine.
The next document that you have, we've tried to kind of put everything together on one page for the entire time period of both CARES 1, ESSER 2, and then the American Recovery Plan, or ESSER 3. And again, looking for board feedback here on priorities and how you all may want to see these dollars spent differently. But primarily, we have started with allocating the amount for remediation. 20% is required to be spent on remediation. We've obviously met that threshold and we'll probably exceed that. But the extra time that we've been providing to our students since February 1st as part of our Ready Start Restart plan, all of those salaries, those additional OPS contracts for that time will be charged to this grant. All of our summer school programming, as well as instructional materials related to those remediation programs will all be charged here. Continuing our instructional mentor program, our TSL grant did not get renewed, so we want to continue that program as long as that's still the board direction, so that's been built into this grant. Additional curriculum support, and then obviously our one-to-one technology initiative, which we've discussed before, and the board has approved. So that's the funding for implementing that, and all the digital devices, as well as the infrastructure component, and additional tech salaries are all built in to this grant for the time period. We've added a new section on strategic plan initiatives and left some of the dollars unspoken for. So as we continue to work through the strategic plan workshop in a few weeks and continue to get additional board direction there, we've left some dollars available to kind of decide where our priorities are going to be moving forward into the next school year. And then you have a couple other items at the bottom. We have left 3 HVAC projects, but we took some of the additional dollars out of that section for previous board direction. And unemployment, COVID leave, and COVID medical costs are all baked into this grant as well. The last handout that you have is Elizabeth Lane has put this together specific to the dollars that we need to spend in the non-enrollment assistance area. So you can take a look at that, and I don't know if there's any questions or anything further. The rest of the team is here if you guys have further specific questions on an area.
Mr. Melendez?
Yeah, and just for a matter of transparency, because I mentioned it before at a prior board meeting, that, like I said, on Congressman Soto's military advisory board, they had mentioned, doing something with the airport at OHS and having a program out there. And so we had somebody from Timber Creek come down today. He gave us a briefing about how they developed their program. There's like a ground school, there's like a dual enrollment with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. So Mr. Arnott was there, Mr. Burdette was there, so CTE. So they're trying to I know there's a lot of different funding pots. There's like the CTE funding pot that we can get something for, dual enrollment and ROTC. But I just want to reiterate it that everybody I've spoken to, including the city of Kissimmee that owns the airport, when I spoke to Mike Stagwell, they love the program. Everybody loves the program. But it's like, okay, let's get it together. You know what I mean? So they might need an additional flight simulator or whatever. So I just want to let the board know that's my only really ask. Out of this board, I kind of agree with staff overall with the budget. But if I can get a wish list, I would like to see an extra allocation for that program to really get launched. Because I think that the ROTC program there is not just unique, but it's unique because we have an airport right in the backyard. And to not take advantage of that opportunity to create an aviation program that includes mechanics, flights, they talk about hospitality. And it's not even in my district, but I'm still fighting for it because I believe it's a jewel, And so I just want to let you guys know that I wanted to officially direct staff to say, hey, whatever monies that we can find, they could probably self-fund it on their own because they might not need it. But if it does need a little extra push to get over the top to get the program started, I wanted to ask your support as a board to give direction and say, yes, that program is important, and we want Osceola High School to shine and having a first-class aviation program.
For me, I agree with you, I think it's important. I'm not ready to direct staff until I know what the trade-off would be
Yeah.
of the money. If you wanna ask them if they can look and see what I don't have any idea what kind of dollars we're talking.
Yeah, and that's what
We're
we're
talking
doing.
100,000 or 10 million, I don't know.
Correct, exactly.
So, I think you certainly, within your purview to ask them, what would this take and where could we get it? And then you bring it back.
Mr. Chairman, as Chairman Emeritus of the Greater Orlando Airport, I would suggest, Dr. Pace, if you're gonna do it, let me schedule a meeting with JetBlue, which has its major training center for pilots for everybody at the Orlando Airport. They've created their whole compound, hotel, et cetera, because that would be, in my opinion, right up their alley of training people, the workforce.
I just didn't want to do a bunch of work if the board wasn't even supporting it. The dollar amount, we don't know. If it's 3 million or something like that, okay, I understand, we can't support that. But I just didn't want to go down a rabbit hole if the rest of the board didn't want to lean to that direction.
I'm okay to ask a question and see what the numbers would be.
We'll do some research.
That's it.
I think we've already started. Jeff already on it.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question, Dr. Pace. I know that we talked about this, this program probably early last year. And I don't know if you have, and you don't have to do this now, but it would be for my benefit, but for the benefit of other board members to know like how far along we are with creating the program, because I guess, we can start there to see what we already have, and then we can allocate, resources to what we don't have.
Absolutely, I can get an update on that.
And talking about a wish list, and that was one of my first wish lists too, was maybe to expand transportation a little bit to allow those students who
Yeah.
can't get the transportation to for DE classes, especially like on the east side of Harmony. So I am still working on that, I just don't have all of the numbers
For
and
Valencia,
logistics. Yeah,
enrollment
to get those kids who can't drive.
Right. I have an additional question about that, because I know that we're losing students to, not us necessarily, us in like K-12 to digital, online education. I know a lot of the colleges are having the same concern. Do we know if Valencia is going to expand their online services? I know some of the classes were not offered online, but they were during COVID. Do you have any idea if that's a trend that's going to continue?
I believe so. Dr. Evans, you and Mr. Flowers have been meeting with them.
Yes, they did express that they would be going back to offering additional offerings face-to-face, but they would also be continuing their digital platform as well.
Okay, and then for our students who are dual enrolled, what is the first priority? Is it just based on who they select as their professor? Or do they have priorities for our students who are dual enrolled?
So they did notify us that they would be servicing their current students, but they would set aside specific designations for our current DE students as well, dual enrolled students as well.
Okay,
But as far as the priority, they would want to service their students, their currently enrolled students first.
is that face-to-face? Is that what their first priority would be, face-to-face? Or would it be online?
It would be online,
Got it,
because that's their larger percentage right now is online.
understood. So then, yeah, our students would then be the ones to do face-to-face. I understand. Okay, thank you.
Great job, Sarah and your team, and I actually do have a few questions out of town, so I'll sit down with you in the next few days, just so do some clarifying.
Okay, well, good. Thank you, and again, thank you to Mr. Gonzalez and Leslie. They've been a tremendous help in pulling all of this together.
Good job.
Good job, Sarah.
Good job, guys.
And most of my questions are already answered already, so you made this last shorter.
Good.
Gotta get back to the meeting.
We will go ahead and adjourn the school board workshop and reconvene the Tuesday, June 1st school board meeting. If you'll bear with me just a minute until I get to the appropriate spot on the agenda. Boards, everybody where they need to get to? Brings us to agenda modifications. Board, Superintendent, any additions, deletions, changes?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have item 10.1 pulled to the next meeting, please.
You want to remove it completely to the next
To the
meeting?
next meeting, that's all right.
Which one is that?
10.01, we just removed it completely. Any other changes?
Don't jinx it.
Am I hearing that? I must not be hearing one.
I think they said this is like.
If there are no done, somebody quick, please make a motion.
So we make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented
With removal.
with the removal of 10.1.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Castillo, second by Mr. Melendez. Approve the agenda with the change. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries 5-0. That brings us to item 12 on our regular. Correct?
I just have a question about something on the consent agenda. I don't want to pull it. but-
We've already voted on the consent.
All right, yeah, this is something I just want to ask a question in general, so I'd say that for new business.
Yeah, save it towards the,
Okay.
towards your board
Yeah,
comment.
there's no need to, that's not going to change my vote.
You can't slow us down by going back.
No.
So you say you're on 12, is that where you're at now?
Yep.
So you want 12.04
Yes.
and move to approve 12.04?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bath, a second by Ms. Castillo to approve item 12.04, which are all the regular facilities items. Board, any further questions or comments? Hearing none, motion by Mr. Bath, second by Ms. Castillo. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries 5-0. That brings us to the public comment portion, and I don't have anything. Mr. Allen, do you have anything?
I'd rather keep it to myself.
Okay. Are there, is there? Did we
I do
have
not
any?
have any, sir,
Okay.
no.
All right, cool. Have closed the public comment portion. Will bring us to Dr. Pace. You have an update?
I do. At our last board meeting, Chairman Thacker, the team requested an update on the student performance measure and VAM as a part of our instructional evaluation. So I've asked Dr. Torres, Ms. Ramey, and Mr. Boyd to share some information with you. And ladies, the clicker is right here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As Dr. Pace mentioned, we were asked to come and give a brief overview of our teacher evaluation, specifically how we calculate our student growth measure.
Excuse me, before you get started, we don't see the presentation on our screens and we also can't open it on our systems.
Okay.
Is that on?
Yes.
There it is.
Okay.
There we go.
Can you see it now?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So this is just an easy graphic to kind of have an understanding and wrap your head around how our evaluation, like the metrics calculate into the final score. There's two main metrics, the instructional practice rating and the student growth, sometimes referred to as VAM, okay? And this is dictated specifically, it looks like we might have missed a few. Through guidance through the statute 101234, and it speaks specifically to at least 1/3 of the evaluation to be contributed by the student growth or a performance measure from students. And this portion of the evaluation must also include student achievement data of the teacher's students.
So the executive order that recently came out, Executive Order 2, what they indicated is that we were going to still have a student growth performance regardless of the changes with school grades and accountabilities. What they did specify is that normally the most robust is the 3-year aggregate that you'll see as we move through. And they, instead of having 3 years, it's 4 years back since we didn't have testing last year. So the model includes 17-18 and 18-19 data along with 20 and 21 data. So that was one of the accommodations they made for us, but the student growth portion is still gonna be part of the overall evaluation from the model that you saw. So for our district, it's 35%. And so for the student growth model that the course is, the teacher determines what the growth model is 35%. Twice during the year, we have a process called roster verification that the teachers go in and they update the students that go up in the October survey 2 and then the February survey 3. And the teachers and the administrators have control over that. So they can remove students for various instances. For this year, for example, attendance was an issue, as we know, with our digital students moving back and forth. And so they were able to remove students and have that flexibility. Right now, our final file is out where they are able to update it as well with students being removed for the students roster for who counts during that student growth performance. And so one of the models that I think had come up was the NWEA testing and some questions about that. So NWEA is a nonprofit organization. You may have seen them. They've done a lot of research recently with COVID slide. And that is going to account for one of district tests, 35%. But it's not, it's flexible in it, and it is based on student characteristics. There isn't necessarily a goal a student has. If we look at the student characteristics, and that provides flexibility in the score that the student would be expected to get in that model. And so overall, we have flexibility in the model for the student growth. And the models are really designed to give the teachers the benefit of the doubt by looking at student characteristics, by looking at whether they were digital or face-to-face, by looking at their movement. All of these models are robust enough to have flexibility in it and in the overall model.
If we skip back to this slide, this just is a capture of the scale that's associated with the student growth measure. And if you notice that effective and highly effective have the highest range or the largest range in that scale, allowing again for flexibility, so a teacher could have potentially as low as a 2.0 for student growth and still receive a score of ineffective for that metric.
Just, Ms. Castillo's got a question.
I have a few questions that I
Do you need her to back up to where she was?
Yes, please.
Can you back up to the slide?
Please, can you go to slide 5? Thank you. Waiting for it to come up here.
The slide here, or is it the next one?
I don't know, because I can't see it,
We
and
don't see any
I'm
slides.
really blind.
I'm not sure why.
I'm blind, so I don't know what that says, but, okay, so let me just,
There
okay,
we go.
it's regarding, yes, perfect, thank you so much. So, first of all, please ignore my ignorance when it comes to the VAM score, all of it, because that is not my expertise, so thank you so much for being here and helping us to better understand this. I think the reason why you guys are here is because we were getting a lot of questions from teachers that are very concerned about their performance ratings for next year or this year. So, again, if I sound ignorant, it's only because I'm trying to understand. So with regards to this, point 2 states that you can have an aggregate score of up to 3 years. Is that correct so far?
Yes.
Okay, so if you know this, what percentage of our teachers will not have that? How many teachers do we have in our system that are on the newer scale and may not have that data? And then what would be the solution for those teachers?
So if a teacher, the state provides us the 3-year aggregate, which is the most robust, and that's the one we ideally want to use because it has the largest sample size. but they do provide us a 2-year and a 1-year aggregate as well, that we get to have. So if, let's say you have a first-year teacher, that they wouldn't have a 3-year aggregate, they would have a 1-year aggregate that would be provided.
Okay, so that potential could be a little harmful if they didn't, just based on adding up the statistics, it could potentially be harmful for that teacher, potentially.
To have a 1-year,
Yeah, just have 1 year
Aggregate.
versus 3 years.
they just have less students in their sample size,
So I guess less diluted data. Okay, thank you so much. Please can you go to slide 6? And this may have been, I just didn't really understand what was being said here. But what I understood is that there are some criteria that can be used to remove students. And you mentioned attendance as one of those criteria.
Yes.
Okay, so does that mean that if a student was absent for a specific number of days, they would be removed from the data set?
Yes.
Okay. What other criteria can be used?
Another way that the students can be removed is if, let's say they haven't been absent a full day, but again, their attendance is off for one of the periods, then that may be a reason why. Sometimes students move in and out of classes right during that week. And so they may have been at the school for a larger amount of time, but through schedule changes, they weren't with that teacher. That could be a reason why as well. And if they have more flexible scheduling, those are also allowed some flexibility. So if the school is changing students throughout the year.
Okay.
So really, we want flexibility with the teachers so they have more say in it.
Okay. But that flexibility doesn't extend to the modality that they use for learning. So digital versus face-to-face, that's not something that's taken into account in this.
For this year, this was a unique situation. So
Okay.
in most years, I don't think about digital students in the
Yeah.
year. But in this year, we did talk to the teachers, okay, how the digital students, what was their attendance, how did they move? Those questions were ones that we had feedback on, and we talked to them through. And I mean, teachers asked really specific questions this year, so we gave them answers about when to remove digital students based on attendance as well.
Understood. So they do have, if they speak to someone, they do have the flexibility,
Yes.
to be able to remove certain students, and that's a case-by-case basis? Okay, thank you so much. I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Rivera?
Okay, so a couple of questions. One, who picks whether or not a student can be removed from their group?
That is a process. So what happens is that the state gives us a very specific website that we end up working through. The teacher will request it, the administrator will review it with them, and then if they need more technical issues, then they contact myself and we go through it, and it's very case-to-case basis.
Who decides in the end?
In the end, normally it's me and the administrator and the teacher in some cases. So we'll go back and ask them through and decide.
And if they disagree?
If the teacher disagrees, if they do it, we err with the side of the administrator in that instead of myself, because I am not at the school site. And so oftentimes if it's something that I want the administrator to weigh in on.
So I'm gonna kind of work backwards from my thoughts and views on the matter, and then kind of go through some of the things that you said. So my idea is that the schools, we as a district, we got a free pass during COVID, right? So my fear is that we are not extending that free pass to our teachers. That's just at the top level, right? And I'm all about accountability and holding, like that's pre-COVID, I'd probably be like, accountability. However, we're in a situation now where maybe the best teacher had the most difficult time getting her students back on track. And I'm afraid that it's gonna be about who can understand and manipulate the system the most, gets the highest scores, as opposed to just, it's taking a lot of focus away from what their focus should be on at this matter, which is manipulating the system, not manipulating, but navigating the system, let's say, right? I'd be afraid that people are gonna be cherry picking which students count and so on and so forth, and trying to figure out how best the system can provide them with a result. And I'm not so sure that that's ever a good formula, just because if it's not the same for everyone, and according to what you've described, it really can't be the same for everyone, right? Then people are gonna have different results according to how they've navigated the system, as opposed to who did the best job teaching their kids. So in terms of accountability, I'm not sure that we're accounting for the same things.
Well,
No, go ahead.
I'll answer that.
Yeah.
It's not a system that's easily cherry-picked because it's not based on a point growth. These are regressions run, and the teachers, we say oftentimes, the more students in your sample size, the less statistical deviation you're gonna have. And that might be difficult for teachers to understand, but statistically, the larger your sample size, the more stable it is. Secondly, these are characteristics that we take into consideration, whether they were digital or not, their amount of absences. Those types of things impact the variables in that regression or the characteristics of it. So in that case, it would be very difficult. We went away from a system where you get a simple point growth, where you could have that. In this case, we're taking into consideration digital students. If they came back mid-year, their attendance rate, their homeless status. In that case, then the teachers, if that characteristic is already in, and that's a variable already in the regression, it's not in your best interest to remove them. So those are the types of things that we go through at the beginning, and then during the verification system, that's what we explain to the teachers. It's not in your best interest oftentimes to remove it, because we're taking those into consideration. That's the flexibility in the system. It's really something to gain easily.
But I have a question on that.
Let me finish, please. So my concern is then, I feel like, then this is just an impression based on what I know about our community, that like teachers in District 1 and District 3, for example, should get a completely free pass because they're gonna have a ton of homeless students, they're gonna have a ton of problem situations. It's gonna be a very difficult process, except for in some other cases, some other places. I think that it's so difficult, and no fault of yours, I think that you guys have done an incredibly creative thinking in coming up with this, but I think it's so difficult that it's not necessarily worth our time to grade the teachers with this level of scrutiny under these types of conditions, right? It's like saying, just in terms that are easy for me to relate to, how well of a soldier can you be after you get shot? How much time is it worth developing that criteria, right? And how much worth is it to find out what that answer is? It may not be. The fact is we have 8,000 employees who are all scrambling to make everything right, to try to get our, everything in order so that we can provide an education, extend an education under the circumstances. And everybody deserves a ton of credit. I'm not so sure that this particular system, I think I may be repeating myself at this stage. The other thing is that I read through the emergency order, I think it's the 9th bullet in the governor's order that says, it allows local districts to make decisions regarding the optional use of VAM data as part of the performance of students in a teacher's evaluation. So it seems like we have a lot of flexibility, that we're not using the flexibility to help our teachers get through the year and just cap it off. It's like we're trying to be maybe, it's like you get a windfall in a budget and then you're also trying to squeeze everybody's budget at the same time on the inside, right? So just from both ends, it may be, to me, obviously I defer to the expertise of the people who know what they're talking about in education, that's not me, but I do know that when you squeeze somebody, right, you don't necessarily get the best amount of performance out of that result. So
In the executive order, when they specify VAM, that's the 3-year aggregate from the state. The executive order still says that we need to use student performance in some case of it, which then would that in case be something like NWEA. The benefit of the VAM in using that 3-year aggregate would be that they have 2 years pre-COVID if they are a 3rd-year teacher, and that could help stabilize their overall student growth.
Now,
Why not remove the COVID year altogether?
for what we get from the state.
Mhm.
That's it, like I said, that would be the state calculation that was in the van. So you couldn't necessarily go 2 years, we wouldn't receive the 2 years prior plus that year that we didn't have testing. In this case, we would just have to go to something that was district-based, which would be NWEA, which wouldn't have 3 years and wouldn't have that stability of the COVID year. So those would be the differences in what we use. Now, if we had a teacher that had, let's say, you had said like a free pass, what if the teachers that are in that group worked well and were highly effective, and then we take that away from them, so that's not part of their student growth. And that's the other part of it. I completely understand that we have teachers who are co-workers of mine in prior years who have worked hard. And so I don't want to punish those who have done amazingly well. And if I have the flexibility, like you said in the order, to really highlight those who've done well, and then, you know, look at the benefit of the doubt for those who maybe had digital classes and were all digital. But I don't want to take away from them what they did, and that could be celebrated. And so there is flexibility in what we use, if we use the VAM, if we use NWEA, how we go about it. And we look course by course and teacher by teacher. This isn't something that is done quickly on any stretch of the imagination. My staff is small and we take time to do this with diligence. And so I know that they worked hard, and if they were highly effective and we just say, well, you're gonna get whatever you got pre-COVID, and that isn't as high of a score, now we damage them in some ways.
Well, then I think that you and I have come to an agreement then. So why not we elevate the teachers who have elevated themselves, and then we put a stopgap measure so that the teachers who didn't perform well under a global pandemic beyond their control are not damaged either. And so that nobody can go below a certain mark, and then the people who really distinguish themselves, you know, allow them to distinguish themselves. So that at least you're not damaged by this. That's my concern, is that I think it's unfair for anyone to be damaged by the process under these conditions, you know, unless you're gonna pass the bill on to China, you know, and you know, but nobody's doing that, right? It's kind of like, if us as a district is not being damaged, right? Like, we're getting a ton of ESSER money, we're getting this, we're getting that, right? All of us students are now being technology, you know, helped. So, you know, it's just, but I think I've said,
I think that is part of the flexibility, and when we talk about compassion and grace, that is really what our overlying idea is in this. It's not something that is done. There is no one rule. There is no saying that you have to score a certain score, and that what makes your students being high enough. That's what we really moved away from, is looking at student characteristics. So there is a lot of flexibility in that system for care and compassion, which, you know, again, I don't want to make one rule and then it end up hurting somebody in the end.
let me ask just one last question. Why are the teachers unhappy then? Because like a fair grading system, normally, everybody's okay with, right? You can come to a consensus and say, you know what? In the Army, everybody has to run X amount of miles in X amount of time. It's fair. If you can't do it, that's on you, right? So why are the teachers unhappy with the process?
I think it is to some degree very scary when certain other accountability measures have been removed and this one hasn't. And so there's just a fear of the unknown, I think, in that, of what's gonna happen. And I think that is part of it. You know, part of the executive order did remove other parts of our accountability system. And so that is, I would say that there is some, you know, is this really gonna be okay in the end type thing. But I normally, in the past, have done everything I can to make sure that it is fair and accurate, and that is not going to change in the next school year. And so it's not something that is fast, and it's not something that we do quickly. I mean, that's what it's a very long drawn out process going course by course through it and teacher by teacher through it. I mean, that's not something that everybody knows we do until now, so maybe that also will give them some reassurances. It's not something that we talk about often.
Ms. Castillo?
Thank you.
Ms. Castillo's next.
Thank you.
And then Mr. Melendez.
You don't have to send this or talk about this now, this is just my own curiosity, but you spoke about some of the variables that go into the scoring. I would like to know what they are, because I feel like that might put some of us at ease, you know, if it's not something out of this world. You may have stated it and I just didn't pick it up, but I am curious to know what the variables are that go into the formula. And then my next part, and this might even be a completely ridiculous question, but I'm kind of in that mode right now. Let's explore everything. So in the presentation, we talked about VAM scoring versus NWEA. Those are two different ways of scoring. May I ask, is there a possibility to do one or the other based on what is most beneficial for a particular teacher?
We have talked about that, especially with our first year teachers,
Yes,
is
that's
running
my
it through
concern.
both, or teachers who are new to the district. I don't wanna say that they're first year, but maybe they're first year to Osceola and they don't have a VAM score. You know, looking at that and running it both ways, that is something that we have talked about as a metric.
Yeah, I think that might be something, again, not being an expert in what you do and really honoring your expertise, but that is something that I think might put people at ease, knowing that they have one or the other based on what is most beneficial for them.
You done there?
Yeah.
Mr. Melendez?
Yeah, I can appreciate the process, and I don't wanna repeat what they said, because both of them said good things. But there's one thing that you mentioned that kind of, I want a little bit of clarification on, because, I think you mentioned something about removing the students or things like that. I don't know what else that you can do that involves a conversation with staff or the principal and yourself. My only concern with that is like a uniform application of that. Because, and I can appreciate what Mr. Aguero was saying, that, because maybe certain teachers know that there's a way to, I don't wanna say manipulate, but to change that data, whatever they can do. I wanna know that, like say for instance, you discover a legitimate claim to remove a student for whatever reason, or whatever thing that you can do to change that formula, right? That becomes like a memo sent out to everybody else, because what if a teacher didn't know that? And I would hate for teachers to know the formula so well and know this process, and other teachers may not know that process. I just wanna make sure that it's a uniform game. Does that make sense? So as soon as we discover that, and it's a legit claim, we approve it, that there's a memo sent out to all the schools, hey, by the way, you should contact your principal too, because this action was approved. If your situation is similar to this, then please update it too, so that when everyone feels like they're on the same level playing field when generating a result.
We do give guidance and clarification, which again, we gave again, because we're in our final one, as you know. So we are currently in a review process again, so it is something that we have discussed, and we send out memos or emails to them with the rules and with the guidance and any updates from them. So we have had our final one going on currently.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Page?
Board members, what I would say is to offer an assurance that we are going to continue to offer compassionate grace for all of our staff members throughout this process. We're gonna give everybody the benefit of the doubt in every situation that we possibly can. But I'm not comfortable not following the statute. So I assure you that this team does not wanna hurt teachers. As you all know, it was a board priority to have teachers have that same compassion and grace from the emergency order that students and schools are able to take advantage of. That wasn't, the language that came out, but we're gonna do the very best that we can to make sure evaluations are fair and consistent and giving people the benefit of the doubt. It has been a very hard year, we all understand that. So many circumstances beyond anybody's control. The kids, the students, the families, the teachers, the staff have all done just amazing work, and we want to make sure that we give them credit for that. So that is what I will assure you. And if there is a teacher who has a VAM score or a student performance growth score that they don't believe is fair or is right, we'll appeal that process. Leah will sit down, walk through every kid and make sure that we've gone back and given that teacher every opportunity to have the right thing happen. That's all I can do is ask for your understanding and that that's what we're gonna do.
Mr. Aguirre?
I think that, one, that's settling, so I appreciate that. It's kind of what I wanted to hear from the school district. The other thing is, what is the potential damage to a teacher in this situation? Like, what is the worst case scenario for a teacher here? What's the worst that can happen? Let's say a teacher has an absolutely miserable year, then what does this scenario do?
It could potentially change their teaching assignment for the upcoming school year. For example, we couldn't maybe put a level 1 student in reading in that particular teacher's class, but those are the kinds of things that would happen. Right now, in terms of compensation, we're still working through the language of the law, but I don't believe performance pay is gonna have to be something that we have to take into account. Obviously, we have to work through the union process with that. And again, double check this one line in some of the latest language that's come out, but we think that's okay. So if you have a bad year, we're gonna make it right. But there's, 2/3 of the evaluation is based on what that principal has observed in the classroom. And if there's a huge anomaly between what the principal has observed and what the student performance growth measure looks like, we're gonna look at that one with even more scrutiny and say, what happened here? Is this really fair and right and reasonable? So that's what I can assure you that we will do.
Thank you.
No, actually, ironically, John answered, he asked the question I was gonna ask, so it's good.
For the second, that appears to answer everybody's questions. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Great job.
Thank you.
Dr. Pace, do you have anything else?
No, sir, that's all.
Brings us to Mr. Kruppenbacher.
No
Anything?
comments.
Yay. Unfinished business. First item on that is the SRO task force findings and recommendations. I know we had the workshop this morning, and we've got a lot of things to discuss, I think, coming out of that. Do we want to do that here? Do we want to set a time to do that? Julius, this is kind of your
What's the timeline?
your baby. What do you tell me what you're thinking?
Well, Dr. Pace created an Excel spreadsheet that I filled in, because I wanted to fill in the items that we all had like an unanimous agreement. So I think that maybe at the next, well, this was the board meeting now, but
Right.
maybe at the next board meeting, we approve the things that have unanimous consent, because it looked like the biggest dissension was the Guardian program.
Right.
But there were other things on there, like putting the website, putting the SRO on a website, including them in the orientation. There's a lot of like what I call low-hanging fruit that everybody had like unanimous consent. And so I think that we can almost approve it now, but I guess if you're not ready for that, we can at least maybe agenda it for the next item, and the next agenda to approve the things that there was unanimous consent on. And so that way we can have some kind of progress, rather than
Yeah.
waiting till we agree on everything.
Hey, Julius, on that,
Wait a second.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Ms. Castillo?
Yeah, my only question regarding that would probably be for Mr. Kruppenbacher. Is there anything on there that, I guess, what's the timeline? Because one of the conversation items that we had this morning in the workshop and in the previous workshop is the SRO contracts. So if we make this an agenda item for the next meeting, how will that timeline be affected?
We'll be okay.
Okay.
Good.
Now, did everybody get a copy of that? Because
She
I
sent,
modified it.
you sent it online, or she sent it.
Yeah, and it was clear, right? So I think I highlighted the brown or tannish color, whatever color it is, I'm colorblind now. The tan ones were the ones that were mixed agreements. The ones that are left blank, that were just a regular column or a regular row, those are the ones that we had a unanimous agreement with. So at that point, like for instance, we said a mission statement, a vision statement, orientations, yada, yada, yada. The point is, we could just basically take that document and then make recommendations from there.
Mr. Ray?
I think Robert was actually,
Sure.
could be me to the punch.
But it was just,
You started, but you started.
well, after that workshop, obviously the Guardian program, that's gonna rise to the surface. Now, I agree with you 100%. I think on the website of each school, they should have that SRO and either a little video blurb, at least so the parents know who that person is. But if by chance there is a Guardian program, should it be expanded to SRO and or Guardian to go on that website? I mean,
schools, right?
per school. I'm not saying that's where we're going, but you follow where I'm going with it. If
I know what you're saying, I love you, Robert. But I would say, let's just keep it to SROs first, and then if they wanna change it to Guardians, we could look at modifying, because whatever we write, even the school board policy or school board rule, is not set in stone
we
forever.
can modify that,
We can always
okay.
modify it later. So right now, I'm believing
And
that we can
trust me,
still keep SROs in
I'm
our
not, listen,
schools.
me too, and I'm with you on that, but I'm just
Mr. Chair.
kind of piggybacking on
I
this.
clarify one thing for the record from listening to Mr. Bass, and I understood how he said it. If we go to guardianship, we were told this morning, it's not you going to guardians. It is the sheriff and the two police chiefs saying that they own and are moving to guardians in the charter schools. I think that's very important for the record, Mr. Bass, that it's been very clear that this board doesn't have the ability to control that. It's not this board's decision. And I think I've effectively heard every board member at one time or another say they would have preferred SROs,
Absolutely.
but it is the jurisdiction of law enforcement. And I say that because people watch this, and I don't want them to think this board is somehow driving this issue.
And I apologize if I come across that way. I'm like everyone else. I would like to see SROs in every school. I'm just piggybacking on the conversation from the workshop. I didn't want to leave anything off on if we're gonna be voting on something. That's all.
Yeah,
I wanna
and the stuff that we have influence over, we don't even have influence really over the charter schools. If we say, hey, put an SRO on the website, the charter schools decide to do what they want anyway.
That's
So
their- yeah, it's
the
their own.
purview or the jurisdiction of what I was thinking about for the recommendations was our traditional public schools,
Right.
or K through 12, so to speak.
Thank you, Julius, for clarifying that.
Okay.
Good, Robert?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
So I guess that's the action item then, right? So the next board meeting, we'll vote to adopt the recommendations
So it seems
that
like,
everybody agrees on, not the recommendations that we don't agree on, but the ones that we all agree on.
Mr. Webb?
so, this seems like the right place to inject this, so I was gonna save this for new business, but I am disheartened by the meeting this morning, by the workshop this morning. I think that the school board should vote on a resolution to request that the law enforcement agencies put SROs in school and allow them to do what they may, as Mr. Kruppenbacher said earlier, that they, that it is completely up to them. So I want to be, this is such a, it's not the favorable move for the community or for the kids in schools. So I feel very strongly about the issue. However, I would like to, I just think that it's worth it that we come up with a statement of what we were expecting, because to me, I'm not as confident as Frank in their move for only charter schools. To me, they were wishy-washy on that answer. They said charter schools, they said elementary schools, then they said charter schools, and I want to make sure that we make our intention, whatever the intention of the board is, that SROs, our expectation is that they stay in schools. So, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Because I had this in my remember comments question. I'm struggling with when we left this morning, what do we do, sort of, and maybe that's kind of what I want us to have the conversation about. I don't know if I really want to have it now, because I'd really like some time to kind of sleep on it, but
Yeah.
and you may be, if I understood what you were saying, you may be right onto something, is we understand you have jurisdiction, but our recommendation is wherever possible to have a SRO in every school, we understand that's also between you and the charter school and your contract, how you choose to go down there. I don't know if that's kind of how we get there or not get there. I don't know what.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with what Mr. Aguayo is saying. Can we Frank, can you draft up some type of a statement in that, along those lines?
Mr. Chair, get a draft and get with you and the
Yeah.
superintendent, and at least you'll have something to talk about
Yeah.
at the next meeting.
Maybe if we do that, it'll make me think better about
Yeah, me too. I mean,
how
it's,
to go down this path, because I'm confused. I mean, I don't.
Well, I think what you are hearing, Mr. Chairman, is they're not taking on the fight this year. They're bright enough to know they're doing the charter schools, but I think they clearly have signaled where this is going.
They want to scope free.
So that's, I mean, I will tell you, John said he heard 3 answers. I think I heard 3 or 4 or 5, but the answer that I heard was traditional schools will have SROs, elementary, middle, high. Certainly in this school year, so.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask authority of the board? I'd like to get with Tanya, and I'd really like to get with you about transcribing verbatim certain portions of that meeting this morning. So it's where they made certain representations to the board, and I think having that in writing from a historical perspective is important. And I only said it because if something goes wrong, this board did not get to control the issue.
And since we're, I'm sorry.
Thank you. May I ask, with regards to the resolution, and this is just like semantics and nuance, are we recommending that we state our position for both our charter schools and our district managed schools within the same resolution?
I think you staked the ground totally in one.
That's where I keep
So
coming from.
everybody,
It bothers me a little bit, maybe more than a little bit, that currently a charter school, we say we strongly would like you to have an SRO, a sworn officer, but you can do whatever you want. Now we're basically saying the sworn officer's no longer, we are not saying it, we're gonna probably say you have the same options. The problem is they don't have anybody that's gonna provide that sworn officer.
Ms. Castillo, I think the wordsmithing on this is very important.
Well, and the reason why I bring that up is specifically because I think everybody has stated, of course, concern for what's currently happening with the transition to guardians within charter schools and, you know, what that conversation was like, but also it seems like we're all concerned about what the next steps are. So I think that if we feel strongly, which I believe
I think there's 5 of us.
5 of us, I wanna repeat that again. 5 of us unanimously think that we should keep SROs in schools, and I think that needs to be stated now before any additional conversations begin.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I agree with what Ms. Castillo said during the board workshop too, so maybe that could work its way into the resolution as well, is that we truly want to partner with them.
Yeah, we do.
And she
That's
mentioned
why-
something about recruiting, if recruiting, retention, staffing, maybe a little bit of budgeting, that we want to partner with them generally. Like if we want to help them recruit, you know, put posters up, or I don't know what that looks like, and the resolution doesn't have to be that specific. It could just say, hey, that we're willing to support you to get there too. It's not just, hey, we would like to see SROs and we're just gonna sit back and wait for you to make it happen. That if they need to do recruitment, if they need to do whatever, that we can allow our school district, you know, Facebook post to say, hey, join the, you know, we'll, whatever. Like I said, I don't wanna get specific, but the point is that we're willing to help them to get there too. Not just saying that we wanna see SROs in every school, that we're willing to partner with them in good faith to see that recruitment, retention, and whatever, staffing is helped to get accomplished.
Can I ask a question first, Joe?
Sure.
There was one thing today that was said in there to me that was extremely troubling. And probably doesn't matter what it is, I guess, but if we do, I'm asking you, Frank, the question. If we do go down a guardian path, in any manner. And I think even if it's at charter schools, we have a responsibility and a right to have input into that. If we do we have the ability to say, this is what we expect out of a guardian?
That's
Yeah,
And I will tell you what scared me to death today. Having a grandparent in a school as a guardian, I don't see any way that works in an emergency.
I actually mentioned.
Or a parent.
I actually mentioned that to a board member after the meeting. The fear of having a grandparent be accountable with a gun.
Or even a
troubling.
teacher.
Or for the whole school,
That said,
are they gonna run?
I tried to today, but they didn't, if you remember, bring up like the uniforms, the guns, and get into duties. One of the things I'm gonna ask for in doing the SRO contracts is, can you give us, the three agencies, a job description
Yeah.
for the guardian of what you expect them to do, so the
That
board
would make
can,
me feel better,
can
I
give
think.
you, I mean, I'm sure they're just not gonna walk around all day with a gun, doing nothing, right? So, law enforcement, can you guys agree that this should be part of what they're gonna do?
And that's kind of my question.
I'd look to
So
Lester and everybody
Yeah,
who
Mr.
who know all of this to give us input for the board on, we would recommend the following be included.
So,
Wait, Mr. Arroyo.
oh, I'm so sorry.
I took
I'm the
his-
one who's always like
I
making
took his
sure,
spot.
I'm jumping around.
Yeah, Frank, I think that this is one thing that needs to be part of one, obviously, this is worthy of a workshop, there's a lot of different items in the air. The other thing is that I think that we need to make this as part of the contracting process, because also what I heard at this workshop is that they were asking for more money. So they were gonna take cops out of schools and at the same time ask for more money. I think that the contracting is the best circumstances, the best opportunity for us to deal with the questions that we have. And I think that the resolution, as much as it is a set of statements directed at our displeasure of taking SROs out of schools, it's also showing our support for the community. The contracting, on the other hand, is how we negotiate the process with our law enforcement officers.
Like I said today, there's 43 school districts that have some form of guardianship, so I want to get a hold of what are their job descriptions, we don't have to, and what are they doing to make it, if we're gonna have it and they're gonna do it, how do we make it the best it can be for our students? I think that's where the board's input can be critical.
Ms. Castillo?
Yeah, this might just be, now we're talking in circles, so I think we all agree that we wanna have some kind of job description, duties, and have some control over that. I was gonna ask for Mr. Yates' input, doesn't have to be right now, but when I asked the question at the workshop about whether or not we can have that conversation, like what is a job description? Can we direct some of that? I mean, is there anything that stops us in statute to direct guardians and to maybe expand or maybe reduce, depending on, what we feel, what their scope of support will be within the schools? I think that's really important. I think that's what we're all saying, so.
Right now, you have a very limited authority because you're dealing with what they've said, charter schools.
Right, but when
But
they
I think
come,
you can clearly telegraph,
yeah,
if they extend to go further, here is what they're gonna encounter and what we would expect. And at least get that issue out there.
got it. Thank you.
All right, so we've circled this issue round and around. My question is, do we want to do this in the next meeting as an agenda item, or as a new,
We have a
or unfinished
workshop,
minutes, or a workshop? What do y'all?
Strategic workshop on the 15th.
I think it would be
Are we
better
able
to-
to, I don't know what time does the strategic workshop start? Are we able to do it that day? Is that too much for one day?
Our board workshop is scheduled to begin on the strategic plan from 1 to 1. And then we had a facilities update at 4, where we're gonna go over the impact fee study, the draft reports. And it usually takes us a couple of hours to go through the strategic plan, because remember, I'll be seeking input from the board for any things that you would want to make sure that we include or add or change moving forward.
What we can do.
I was gonna take that day off completely anyway. So I'm wondering,
Which day? would be
it's
15th?
Tuesday the
14th or
15th.
something?
It's a Wednesday.
It's the board's pleasure. If you'd like to have a workshop that morning on this item, would I invite law enforcement, or is this strictly a workshop
I think
business
we know
for
what they
us?
want. I think this is our discussion on how, what
I think we take it one step at a time, and on the 15th, just do the recommendations that we agree on, and then kind of move over, because everybody needs time to study, to really discuss. Like I said, that was my frustrating thing too about this process, and not that it matters, and I shouldn't really vent with the rest of the board, but we had those task force meetings, and at the very last hour, when Guardians came up, so I didn't even have an opportunity to really look at it and see what was out there and things like that, so I'd rather let's just stick to what we have, and let's get to what we agree on, call it SROs in our district, and work on a resolution.
In terms of the recommendations, though, I think that the low-hanging fruit is not worthy of a workshop, because we can all.
Yeah, we don't need a workshop for that, we can just
so
go
that
on
could be
the
the agenda.
15th.
That could
The
be on the
workshop,
regular
I think, is the process where we discuss some of these other security issues or security agency issue relationship.
Mr. Thacker, I think that Dr. Pace, from an operational standpoint, and me from a legal standpoint, can bring back something on a job description that this board would be very supportive of. I have no, which would enable everything to move.
Okay.
I'm just scared of putting out a job description and saying, oh, this is what you guys want, we really don't want Guardians. So I'm kind of hesitant.
Let's maybe
Oh, I see.
slice this pie up in several pieces
And it beats the wrong
and start
structure.
working our way through. And I'm fine with that.
We don't need to
Okay.
pay for the charter.
Masks.
Face mask.
Controversy.
21, 22, 23, 24, what?
So are we adding a workshop or not?
No, we're gonna put
No.
it as a regular agenda item on the, on an approval of,
Agreed upon recommendations.
So maybe Mr. Melendez, you and I can sit down and go over.
Yeah,
yeah, you,
yes, I'll do that.
Mr. Melendez will kind of drive what he believes those are. Agreeable? But I think we can,
Yeah, because that's a good point, 'cause I need to talk to John Boyd, because some things are in the policy, some things are just internal documents, so we may not have to have a recommendation for policy, so. I'll
yeah,
sit
if it's
down
already
with
sitting
Boyd.
there, we're probably good.
Yeah. Okay.
Face mask. What is the,
We would go with the infectious disease experts, I think.
we had something we had to do with this, we had to have this on this meeting for some reason, right? Oh, because of summer school.
Yeah, summer school's on the
Summer
6th
school,
or
okay.
something.
It's all coming back to me slowly.
Okay, May Chairman Thacker,
Sure.
you requested that we reach out to our partners in the health
Yes.
fields to get their input and guidance. They weren't able to be a part of our meeting today, but you do have in the agenda the latest guidance from the Florida Department of Health in Osceola County, which basically says that the CDC guidelines for masking have not changed for schools. They expect it to be updated anytime, but the last time it was released was May the 15th, and it still, as you can see in the language there, has an expectation that facial coverings be continued. I do know that many of our neighboring districts have already taken steps to announce that masks will be optional in the fall. It's, you know, I don't know. Just to take you back, the board adopted the Ready, Set, Start plan on June the 30th of 2020. In that document, it included that facial coverings would be worn, but that students could take them off if they were working quiet independently at their desk. At the following meeting in July, when we brought forward a recommendation to move the calendar back a week for students and to have that extended pre-planning based on the feedback that we were getting from teachers in the community about giving it a chance for COVID to slow down just a little bit after the 4th of July, we modified what was in that plan, the Ready, Set, Start plan, to include that facial coverings would basically be worn at all times other than eating and like recess, based on what the CDC guidelines were at the time. We did not formalize it into policy, but it was procedural that the board adopted and took action on.
Well, there's also some other concerns. I actually visited a school today and I did like a teacher survey. Other concerns other than masks that relate to it are there's some, we block teachers from teaching in the rooms, like an art teacher, a music teacher. So at least at the school, the students move, not the teachers. I mean, another way around, yeah, or I think the other way around. I think the teachers are moving and they're not teaching from their classroom. So at least they wanna be able to teach in their classroom and have the students move to them. So that way they're familiar with their environment, you know, it's like, it's their classroom. So they want the students to be able to move, not the teachers.
Well, and I fully anticipate that we'll be able to do that. It was just in the fall when COVID was bad, that again was one of our procedures, that you kind of try to keep kids in cohort and have the adults move more than the kids, so that you didn't have that movement back and forth and interacting with different children and those types of things. But, you know, it's
No, we
certainly.
understand the past and why it happened. I'm talking about moving forward. When we discuss, hey, removing face masks, I think part of that discussion needs to be that too. So are we planning for the fall year to be able to go back to a normal classroom where students can move to classrooms, separate classrooms, instead of having a teacher move to where the
That's
students
our
are?
current plan.
Mr. Arguello, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think that the issue that we're running into is the absence of an actual policy in this situation. Since our previous statement, since the board itself voted on anything, people have been vaccinated, new studies have come out, more information is readily available. The fact remains that we don't have a policy. We were piggybacking off of the county's policy, which is set to expire in 30 days, and then what happens then? I mean, we are essentially right now creating a procedure in lieu of policy to continue the mask situation, right? Is that what I understand? Is that because I think that that's something that we need to vote on, as opposed to us just allowing a procedure to be in lieu of policy, and it's obviously it's just not the right way to do this. I think that we need a policy. We need to come up with a policy, and then we need to come up with a vote and ask people, because we don't know how people feel about it today. So, and I'm speaking about the board members, how they would vote.
Part of the reason this is on today's agenda, though, was because of summer school, right? What do we do in 5 days when they start, or how many days it is?
The
And
program's starting next Monday.
5 to 6
The
days.
executive order of the governor was July 1st.
Yes,
So
not applicable to us according to the Department of Education, so.
But we don't have a policy.
Right, you are in.
So it does apply to us because we don't have a policy of our own.
The governor's order did not apply to school districts. It creates massive confusion for saying that, because if you go out to the general public, they think the governor's rescinded all masks.
Right.
Right, so you were in the position of perception versus, the reality.
But we're piggybacking off of the county's policy, right? The county's mandate, which the county's mandate is ineffective beginning July 1.
Yes.
So then we're absent of a policy.
After July 1.
after July 1, but
July
right
1.
now, the start of
That's
summer
correct.
school is the concern.
Right.
So for now, July.
So, or what you say is then, we continue to follow that mandate till July 1? I mean,
That's not me.
That's why I
would
didn't
like
think
to-
so, that's why I was curious.
In case anybody's noticed, I think that I would like to make masks optional for all students and parents. But it's not, obviously, this is not an issue that's up to me. Regardless, we need a policy, we need to vote as a school board, we need to decide what we're gonna do. Otherwise, you're gonna have a lot of contention regarding the issue, and we're just gonna delay it until, at what point?
I kind of feel like we need something by Monday.
Like today.
By now.
I said, what
Well, I
can
mean, we have to do it,
Yeah.
Look,
but I mean,
these things are here in place to protect me from inhaling and from protecting me from
Excellent.
obviously from spreading it. If I am a teacher and I still feel the need that I still want to be protected, then by all means wear it. If I have a student, sending a student to school and I want them to be, then by all means wear it. But I think if we've all been to restaurants, how many in this room have been going to restaurants and going out in public and it's almost like it's not existent anymore. I mean, I very rarely see people adhering to this. So I have not run across one person, one teacher in the school district that at least in my world that wants to keep these things as mandatory. So I agree with Mr. Guayo. I have no problem at all moving forward with making it a voluntary situation, beginning with the summer session. I don't know what else to say. I mean,
I guess we can vote on it. I mean, I've been in situations where they have already been voluntary, including at my own job. If you're vaccinated, nobody asks you any questions. If you wanna wear a mask, you wear a mask. If you don't wanna wear a mask. I have spoken to some folks in my area and it's mixed, right? I have some parents who are like, do not remove the masks, but they're also open to having them as voluntary because at the very least they get to make their choice for their family. So, I mean, I do think we have to vote on it now because we do have, school opening up on Monday and once again, we can be the leaders because
I agree
don't
with
think
John,
Orange
not having
County-
a policy is not
I don't think
right.
Orange County has voted yet, so.
And I'm pretty sure that in Osceola County, the county buildings are still requiring masks for you to go in them, whatever that
I
means.
guess my personal opinion is it matters, 'cause it's a vote here. But I'm willing to just say, hey, July 1st, the governor made that July 1st deadline. I wouldn't mind sticking to that deadline. And at the very minimum,
Optional.
it's optional after that, correct?
I would use a
Optional
little
until
bit.
July
It gives us a
on that,
date, the governor's attached to it.
Unless the CDC relaxes prior to that.
Because then it seems kind of arbitrary, we just chose our own date just because of summer.
That makes sense,
As opposed
actually.
to coming from an external source. Like if the CDC said optional, or the governor said optional, the governor's pretty gung-ho, man, ain't no many people more gung-ho than he is. And if he said July 1st, then I think
So,
he's leading the charge.
Motion, then I'd like to make the motion to make masks optional on July 1st when the governor's executive order takes effect, and unless the CDC relaxes the masking requirements prior.
Does that make sense, Doctor? Is that
Yeah.
important?
I'll second that with discussion.
I have a motion by Mr. Arguello, with a second by Mr. Bass, that masks will remain in force until July 1st, at which time they become optional, unless the CDC preempts that with a change prior, in which case that we would enact CDC guideline.
Now, would this be across the board, or is there any caveat with school buses? Because, our school buses are pretty packed. So I don't know, what's,
Ask the
Right,
motion
and
maker.
big-
I think you're gonna have a nightmare if you have a different policy for those.
I know,
Yeah,
but
I
I'm
think
just
they-
gonna ask, people will ask, that's all, I'm just,
Because remember, if somebody feels uncomfortable, they can still put it on,
They can still put
even
it on.
in their order, if they feel
There's a
super
lot
uncomfortable.
of peer pressure on that. Mr. Shatera, do you have anything from the bus, from that area? Any opinion?
I think the drivers are gonna want masks.
And I also
The
think,
drive, oh, you mean from the students wearing masks?
Yes. You've noticed when they're going down the road, you see an empty bus, but the driver still has their mask on.
will the driver?
I don't know why people do that, maybe because they're afraid they'll forget when they get out. I don't know. I mean, we could take a little survey of them real quick, but.
Ms. Castillo?
yeah, and I was just gonna bring up the whole bus situation. I don't know if it was last board meeting or the meeting before, we had the update from the back to school task force, and one of the things that they did say is whether or not their masks are optional in the buses. Am I right about this? The recommendation was to keep masks in the buses, and this was a task force which includes the our folks from Nemours as well as from the local health department. So if we're gonna talk about that, based on that recommendation, the recommendation is that we keep masks in the bus.
So
Those are
you're
my 2
asking
cents.
for a change in the motion to add keeping mask in the bus? Is that your question?
I'm saying that that is a recommendation from our back to school task force, and that does include our experts that we have relied on for the past year.
What time frame are you looking for that to expire, just out of curiosity?
I don't know, Lou, I would have to go back to see what they've said. I don't think that they had an expiration date on that, based on what I remember reading in the.
Dr. Pace, do you have an opinion on, or research on the buses? I mean, I don't know if y'all separate this issue when you have these discussions, or,
The concern about the buses is that we know that we can't social distance on buses, even 3 feet. So we've kept it to 2 kids to a seat as opposed to 3 kids to a seat. But again, there's an extra cost in that, and people have not really been using buses like as much as they have in the past. A lot of folks have carried their kids to school to avoid transportation on the bus. I anticipate that we'll go back to normal in the fall in terms of, having to prioritize routes based on the number of kids that we can get on the bus, regardless of 3 to a seat or 2 to a seat, depending on adults high school kids as opposed to younger kids, simply because I anticipate that we could run into a shortage of drivers again.
How do
We were
you,
very fortunate this past year to maintain good attendance, but as cruise ships start running, attendance sometimes gets a little bit less for our transportation folks.
are, normally in the summer, I'm sure we run fewer buses, do we pack our buses, or?
No, not in the summertime.
Mr. Arguello?
Yeah, I just, from what I read, crammed on a bus without much circulation unless the windows are open, or if the windows are open, they might be safer on a bus than somewhere else. If it's packed, then you might not be any safer with or without a mask. Have we had any cases of transfer of the disease on a bus?
Yes, we did.
So that's where, how many times has that happened?
I only know of one because they happen to be family members.
So, and they got it on the bus?
They gave it to the bus driver and the attendant and several other people on the bus.
Yeah, so I mean, it may be a good idea.
Not that I'm proud, but.
That's definitely, depending on what the usage of the buses are, I mean, that may be definitely a consideration, so.
If the challenge is putting all of that into a motion, then perhaps we should say until further guidance from the CDC with regards to the bus situation. That helps with
I don't know if
setting
they-
up.
I'm open to supporting amendment with
Would they
buses.
would they ever guide us on buses?
I don't think it would,
Yes.
guys.
They will?
Because that's yeah, that's where we got the original guidance from.
Well, and I think in our motion is subject to CDC changes, so.
Yeah, okay.
If they change that bus guidance,
Okay, so
I think we.
mask on buses, optional July 1st, absent any further guidance that preempts it.
CDC changes.
Yes.
So you have amended basically for that. Are you second it, right? You're okay with the second?
Okay.
All right, we have let me see if I can do the motion. We have a motion by Mr. Aguayo, second by Mr. Bass. Bass is remain in effect until July 1st, which is the governor's date, unless the CDC preempts it, and mask will stay required on buses.
Unless it's
Unless
preempted.
CDC preempts that as well.
And they're optional after July 1.
Be optional after July 1.
For the schools, unless CDC changes that rule.
I just have a question on the motion. And I don't quite know how the CDC recommendation takes place. Is there a chance that the CDC, July 1, says no mask inside or masks are optional everywhere, except buses?
Mr. Chairman, they're getting a lot of pressure from the airline industry that they really want to deal with this mask mandate, because I flew the other day and one of the pilots they were all complaining about everybody on the plane. You have to wear the mask constantly and you have to keep it above your nose. They'll come around and say it. So they're gonna be tackling this issue that's gonna have an impact because they're looking at all the public transportation right now.
All right, well, my feeling is I'll support the motion as it is, and if something changes, doesn't mean we can't do something else,
Right.
whichever way it changes.
I agree.
With that, we'll go ahead and take a minute. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries 5-0. Yay.
Wow, what a day.
New business, I don't believe we have any. Board member comments? Mr. Melendez?
Yeah, one thing that came about in that same meeting with the teachers was, we talk about temperature checks even after COVID. Let's say COVID goes away.
So what check?
Temperature checks.
Temperature check, okay.
Because they said that, even without COVID, if somebody has a 100-degree fever, the parents don't want to take off of work or whatever, and they're still dropping off a little kid and they're spreading the sickness, period, whether COVID or not. And now that we have the logistics of temperature checks, is that something that we want to continue doing in the future? I mean, I don't need an answer now, I'm just sharing with the board what was said, you know what I mean?
What school level was that you went to?
I went to Parton Settlement. I didn't wanna call out the school, you know, it's
No,
not-
it's elementary, it's fine,
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
yeah. I was there, it was a teacher luncheon, it was appreciation, and I was there and I spoke to him, and I was like, hey, I'm just curious, you know, you guys have a board member, you can ask me any question you want. And so they took the time to really ask me questions, and so I'm just kind of forwarding that up there. And so just something that they're talking about, you know, since we do have these thermometers and sensors, because even after it's done, do we would just dump them and sell them or give them away for free to the Department of Health? Or do we continue using them for doing temperature checks as kids in school? So just something to consider what we do with all this stuff that we have, you know, moving forward. And then the other thing there's two more things they mentioned, was something about unused insurance. Like sometimes people have health insurance, but their spouse has a better insurance plan for whatever reason, and they don't use it. They were talking about, can they get like a buyback or like a voucher or some kind of payment because they're not using it at all, and it's not a cost on them. So do they get a contribution to like their FSA, their flexible spending account? Do they get? I mean, but I don't know. That was just a topic that was brought up, and I didn't know the answer to that. Maybe we have something like that, but is there any payment to them
I
for?
thought a while back we had that, and I don't know, like $750.
Other companies do.
opt-out credit that they can then use on other voluntary benefits. So vision, dental, life insurance.
Okay, so there is, so $750 opt-out? Okay.
One time or recurring?
Annual.
And the last thing they mentioned was that, and it was an example, because they have the deaf and hard of hearing hub, that the classes.
You fell for that one.
You know, that if the kids can have that class as an elective at those type of schools, since that school is deaf and hard of hearing, there's a lot of them, can they be approved to have an elective class? You know, just instead of taking like, say, a foreign language or something like that, can kids take sign language courses so they can talk to their fellow students, you know, and that just doesn't apply there, that applies to all those type of schools. You know, anytime there's a hub for something, for whatever the reason, can we offer like extra elective courses for them in that way the surrounding students can feel like, hey, you know, there's a sign language kid and maybe I want to learn some sign language and teach them too. So I just thought that was an interesting thing they brought up as well. So, that's it.
You're good? Christina?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Bass?
We've covered a lot today. I think I'm good today.
Dr. Pace?
Nothing, sir.
What time is it?
Graduation at 6 o'clock.
I
Nothing with them.
Unfortunately, I have two things. One is, and this just came to light when we went through the budget process with Sarah today. When she gets in the budget, when you look in there and you start looking at the categorical fundings and stuff, I don't know if any of you have been to this or not, but the FSBA offers, I think it's called finance training or something. And I will tell you, it is the best class I've been to. I think it's a day and a half or something like that. Of all the classes they've had, because it gives you a really good idea of the categorical fundings and the funding formula, and you really kind of learn, the pulls and takes from that formula and kind of what we get and what we've done. I just would highly recommend, and it's not offered all the time, but I would highly recommend.
It's offered this time, yeah.
Is it, if it's, have you already had it? It's like a day and a half, yeah, that's excellent training, I think. The next one I have is, over the weekend, I got a draft agenda of Mr. Aguirre's committee set up. And it brought a couple things to light to me that I was kind of concerned with. The way it came out on letterhead and from the board secretary, it looks like a board sanctioned committee. I don't think the board has sanctioned that as of yet, or it's not come to us. The other concern I have is, because we did talk about this in the school board policy, currently, if the board doesn't sanction it, we can't use school resources. So we just be very careful with using resources on a committee that doesn't have full board sanctioning or appointees or whatever I don't know what kind of the right word for that is. So, I've said before, and I totally believe everybody's got a right to, as a citizen, to do anything you want, any committees. But I think we got to be very careful with using school resources or asking some of the school resources to help and putting them in a bad position. So that's all I've got.
That being the kicker.
On that issue, I'm gonna need the board to identify what do they mean if that's their position by school resource officers. Oh, using school
Resources, people, buildings,
okay, that's my point, is meeting in here.
not resource officers. Forget that one, we finished it.
Oh.
Oh, no, we didn't.
Is meeting in here the use of a school resource?
I don't know, that's probably, maybe that's up to the board.
Right.
My viewpoint, when somebody walks in this building, it looks pretty much like a school board function.
Yeah.
So, that's just my opinion.
So then, I think,
But I think that's an appropriate use. It's just like how churches can use a school, the cafeteria to handle a function. I believe that as a school board member, they can use the facility as long as they reserve it out. Now if it's booked for something else, then yes, I can see something else taking priority.
I kind of agree with however anybody can go and reserve a cafeteria or whatever.
Right.
Whatever that is, I don't know how that works or anything about it, I think that's legit, sir.
Right. But you're right.
I think the school board chambers are a little different.
Right,
So-
and the letterhead should definitely be individual, not the school board itself, and it shouldn't represent itself as a school district committee. But-
yeah, it was an individual. So then at this time, then I'll make a motion also to sanction the task force that I set up. I think that you guys have all seen the agenda. So,
Oh, you mean to vote on it to make it
Yep.
official? I can second that.
I have a motion and a second on sanctioning or making that committee district-wide. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
Aye.
Aye. Motion fails.
No.
I
Two.
mean,
I
still
don't,
meet, it's just not sanctioned.
Yeah, you can meet, it's an individual committee.
I hate to be a stickler on this, but I get from any one of you questions, so I'll say it. Using this room entails having at least one staff member who has to open and shut down the place, et cetera. So I am going to answer the question that a board member who wants to have a meeting in here with anyone, needing that, I would, for everyone's benefit, interpret that as not using a school resource.
Meeting here?
I would
I mean, the
disagree.
door, it's open.
I think
It's not-
having individual meetings here does not. I think having a committee meeting.
Right. And that includes using somebody who would open and close the place up.
Yeah.
All right, good.
and I do want to say, I'm open for public input. I think the more public input we receive, the smarter, the better we are. But as far as it being a sanction with us, see, I didn't have any input on who to put on. I was not unable to put
And
anyone
none
on.
of us had any,
And I just,
input on that
that's
at
where I
all.
was, that's where it was getting, the line's a little fuzzy with me, that's all. But I'm open for anyone who wants to meet and share the knowledge and be it through any one of our board members, that's all.
so then Frank, can this operate as an advisory committee just to me then?
But that's what it is.
Yeah.
that's what.
Yeah.
And so,
But it's still subject to the sunshine. Let me just make sure, even though it's gonna just
can
advise
it
you.
be? I mean, is that the case? Because then it would not be a public meeting. It's not sanctioned by the school board. It has no,
Well, if you
it has
look
no
at
authority
the
to do
AG
this.
opinions, well, you're contemplating they're gonna give recommendations, and those
to me,
recommendations.
apparently, only to me.
Or they could come here and get.
Between now and our meeting tomorrow night that I have to attend, I'll answer the question. There's just, the AG's got opinions that go this way, and they're all fact-driven.
Yeah. So I think that'll be very
It's
interesting.
better to err on the side of caution just in case,
Sure.
but you're right, it's not officially.
Well, a lot of people have been talking about the sunshine law recently without really understanding the sunshine law.
a lot of
So-
people also got information from attorneys before they talked about the sunshine law, so people weren't just out there throwing it out.
Yeah, they may want to investigate it further, but
Sure, if you
My
ask an
point-
attorney and you go by what the attorney says, I feel like that is
I have one
sufficient
right here.
investigation. Same,
and he,
I had the same attorney as you did.
yeah, so he disagreed.
Maybe
No.
you disagreed with both of us at the same day?
Two different issues. I recommended that Ms. Castillo abstain because I had not had a chance to read the charter agreements to see if the issue would have come in front of the board. And if it was gonna come in front of the board, I thought it best that she just abstain.
Is it coming before the board?
No.
Tonight?
Okay.
All right,
So,
all right. The second issue then was, that Fred brought up was the appearance of a conflict. And based upon what I've seen so far, your attending it would not have violated the Sunshine Law if I had known ahead of time, because there was no action that was going to come in front of the board. That said, there can be an argument because you have jurisdiction of the school, of the charter schools from, that somehow that could. This is a quagmire of a law, all right?
there's also intention, right? So that without the intention of violating the Sunshine Law, it's very difficult to have a sunshine violation.
Well,
Right.
if we're gonna talk about this issue openly, I asked if I was going to leave, if you remember that. It's on tape. So I was willing to leave so that you could stay in the meeting, and the request was made that I stayed. So that's the way it was. Please do not try to make this into something that it's not. I specifically said I would gladly leave so that my fellow board member can stay, and the board decided that I was the one to stay. So that was what happened.
I wasn't actually referring to you or to even that situation.
You
brought it
were,
up, but
just be clear with what you were saying.
I am
You
always
were.
clear about what I say.
You were
and I
exactly
wasn't
talking about
referring-
that.
Wait a minute.
So
De-escalate here.
anyways, so is this committee then tomorrow night, which will be held here?
As of right now, it's my intention to advise them to govern themselves under the Sunshine Law,
So can we get it,
records law.
can we get a definitive to make sure that these facts
Yep,
actually
that's
fit the
based
Sunshine Law?
on, but in light of the discussion tonight, I'm gonna go back and double check it.
Excellent, thank you
Okay.
so much, Frank.
With that,
Ms. Castillo, thank you for following my advice at that meeting.
No. I mean, next time I'll just write a Facebook post to let everybody know what I've
All
done so
right,
that it's clear.
with that, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much for a long day, including those of you who have been with us